Well, hello. It looks like we are live. I didn't expect to go live a little bit earlier. We had a bit of a test stream there, but we're trying to do something a little bit different with a Let's Debate format of the top 10 video games of the year 2020 edition. In the prior 2 years, I've done specialty videos that have talked about everything that's come out in the years that we were watching, 2018, 2019. But I really am not going to have the time here at the end of 2020 to do that. I also was getting a lot of requests to hear from my long dormant brother, Tom, who hasn't been on the channel since, I believe it was February. Tom, is that right?
I thought we did one post quarantine starting, but
Did we do one post quarantine starting? And people that are watching, if you can let me know that you can hear Tom, I would love to get that confirmed because there are a lot of buttons here, and I'm just a poor lawyer trying to figure out the crazy YouTubes of the world.
Can I? Is there a way I can see the stream?
Yeah, I'm going to try to link everybody to it. I will try to send it to you so that you can see what we've got up here, Tom. I just want to make sure that it's working, and I just need somebody to tell me, yes, we can hear him just fine, which means I hope you are all excited. We're going to talk about our 10 favorite games of the year. We have two separate lists. We have honorable mentions. We have some terrible, terrible choices by my brother that we're going to try to understand together on a rational basis. And ultimately, it's Saturday night. We're going to try to have some fun here because I quite frankly just couldn't do another CD Projekt Red Cyberpunk video, even though I could probably make 3 more. So if you're interested in this conversation, this will be archived. You can check it out later. But if you're here with us right now, yeah, please leave your comments. Tell us how stupid we are. That's what I love to hear on YouTube. This is just going to be a fun, casual conversation. And now I have to link this to my brother and let him know where he can see it. I'm going to tweet it out. Tom, if you can just chat with folks, introduce yourself, tell people what you're not allowed to talk about, where you work. I'm going to get that done right now.
Oh, yeah. I haven't had to do one of these disclaimers in a while. Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Hoeg, Rick's little brother. I work in the games industry. I work for High Moon Studios, which is a subsidiary of Activision. And so I'm not allowed to... Actually, I think that what I'm supposed to say is these opinions are my own. They don't represent the opinions of Activision. Not
or
that
anybody else. They don't represent anybody's
or anyone
opinions.
Else.
Just his.
I don't think Activision has like a real feeling on the best games of the year. I mean, probably they'd say their own. But so yeah, and I obviously can't talk about anything that I'm working on right now, but I don't think that's going to really come up.
Okay, and I just linked you where the video is. You can confirm that you can see it, and then we're just about ready to get started.
Okay. Let's see, I got... All right, yeah, I got to get used to not watching the chat.
Don't look at the chat. First of all, the chat is going to tell you you're a silly person, so you don't want to let it get you down. All right, These are our top 10 games of the year. These are not chat's top 10 games of the year.
I'm brilliant, and they will love my choices, I am sure. So yeah, I won't watch the chat. You can just tell me if the chat says something I should respond to.
Okay, you do that. I think it's always best to try to ignore the chat. They love to hear that too. They tend to add comments that say,
I know, that's really what they love about live broadcasts is if you totally ignore them.
They love to be ignored. That's everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. Okay, so Tom, you can see the stream.
Yeah, I can. There's a present. There's a
fantastic
gift box.
A gift box. That's right, chat. You can hear Tom. So let's start talking about this. So as I said, we've done Game of the Year stuff before now. Tom hasn't had any input. He would undoubtedly disagree with maybe the bulk of what I have put up in the prior years. A lot of you come into my comments and note that I never did the top 4 of 2019, which I have intended to correct really all year long. But as you might be aware, 2020 has been a special year for us all. So this year, we compiled our own lists. We're going to talk about the entries on those lists, and we are going to debate them, chat about what we like about the games, what maybe the other person doesn't like, why they don't appear on the list, why they don't appear as highly on the list. And before we get into that kind of list action, we do have a list of what we're calling honorable mention. These are games that actually don't appear on either of our lists, so you get a little preview of what we didn't include in those lists. But I wanted to bring that as a card so that we can discuss it, because there are a lot of good games here. 2020 was a terrible year for a lot of different reasons, but releasing video games, with the exception of maybe some poor launches in the immediate recent past, it was excellent. A lot of great games for a lot of different types of folks that love games. And I've got some honorable mentions here. The first is SnowRunner. If you haven't heard of this game, this is an absolutely terrible, impossible game where your truck gets stuck in the mud, gets stuck in the snow, and you basically just have to drive very slowly to various hard-to-reach places and try to get logs and other various heavy objects out of the mud and or the snow. It is absolutely zen. It is fantastic to play. You get a lot of different trucks. You get a lot of different options. Tom, did you even play this one?
No, I'm familiar with, Mud Runner? I'm familiar with the concept, but
Right.
Those kind of like simulation games have never been really something that I've gotten into. Like I'm not playing Truck Simulator or anything like that.
You don't see the word simulator in that title, do you?
SnowRunner it's like muddy truck simulator.
Yeah, okay, it is. But Michigan's in it. I have to play any game that has Michigan in it. And
I love the ones that have like America or like real locations, but they have to obviously squeeze it down so you drive like for 30 minutes and you're in like Illinois.
okay, you can call out the crew. You can subtweet at the crew if you want. Or I guess Death Stranding, right, where you go to the next base and you went from DC to Pennsylvania or something like that. But
Yeah,
very
it would have been a real bold decision to let you walk the full distance.
Well, very similar to Death Stranding. SnowRunner is what I generally consider an every inch a mile game, where it's just really hard to do anything. It's really hard to get up that hill, where if you're playing like Assassin's Creed, you just kind of vault over the thing. It's hard to do anything in that game. I really like it. But I know you didn't play it. The next one is Fall Guys, which I did want to give an honorable mention to. I got it as part of my, I think, PlayStation Plus subscription. It was a lot of fun for families. It's a great kind of take on Battle Royale. I know you didn't quite take to it, so it only hits the honorable mention side of things here, but I really do think it's a lot of fun, and they get a lot of things right in terms of continuing to motivate you and just having a single button that you can press on the start screen that just vaults you into whatever it is you're doing, even if it's kind of walking around with egg people kind of dumbly towards an end line.
I know people that adore it, but yes, the kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, muddiness or the like. I didn't like the controls. Like it felt not tight. Sometimes you could lose just because you had an unfortunate bounce, and that's fine for just sort of a fun like party game, just kind of like chill out. But it wasn't for me.
Yeah. No, I get you. I've had a lot of fun with it. I have to admit, I've fallen off it, no pun intended, since it came out. But I really did have a lot of fun with it. Obviously, the price was right if you already had PlayStation Network or PlayStation Plus. I forget what everybody's calling everything. I'm just going to start adding the word plus to every corporate brand name. I assume they have some service. The next one I wanted to point out is one that I would have anticipated would be on my top 10 before the year started, which is Watch Dogs Legion. I enjoy the Watch Dogs games more than most, but a lot of things really hit me the wrong way when I started Legion. And so it's a great game. It's an interesting thing that they've built there with different systems and the ability to recruit different people. But the game actually, in my opinion, suffers for that. To allow for that breadth and those systems, you really can't tighten up the story or the narrative drive. And so you get a really cool kind of sandbox that unfortunately has a lot of thoughts on politics and tends to swear at you every single minute that you play it.
Yep. You were looking for commentary from me. You didn't flag me.
Just in case anybody is clipping these or at all, I want that to be Tom's contribution to the conversation. As I give a paragraph description of a game, and Tom says "yup." Just so you want the full THABTO feel. This is how half of our phone conversations go. So I tend to be the talker. Do you have any thoughts on Legion, buddy?
I think I actually liked Legion a little bit more than you, because I like its kind of open-ended puzzle solving.
Okay.
I agree that narratively it didn't feel particularly strong, though I thought it had a decent opening.
Yeah, there's some drive there.
There's some cool systems with the idea you can recruit anybody, but I think it ends up making everyone feel kind of like unimportant. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
We talked about this a little bit. Like there needs to be some sort of protagonist, even if that protagonist is not someone you play as typically or whatever. Like there needs to be some force that's moving things forward, and it's a totally generic like person off the street. Like in the beginning of the game, you just pick from one of like a dozen random people.
Yeah, and Legion tries to handle it a little bit. They have like your handler that comes up on your video screen and things like that. But I agree. I would have had some Marcus or some Aiden stand-in where, yeah, maybe he can't die. Maybe he can't go on all the missions, or she. I think that would be great. Either way, it's a character that has some reason for doing this. Instead, you pick a person, and then you don't really know why they care about any of this. And then you pick the next person, and unfortunately, in order to facilitate the breadth, you have these kind of fake conversations where it's like, hey, you want to blow some stuff up? And she's like, actually, I do. And then they're in DedSec, and then you do some stuff. And it's like, within that, there's cool systems. There's a lot of emergent missions. It's a nice city. It's fun to check out. But at the end of the day, it wasn't what I wanted, and I don't love it as much as I would have hoped. The next entry on our list would have been on my top 10 list for the amount of time and the amount of games I have played it in 2020. I found Dead by Daylight this year, primarily because of the Stranger Things pack, which was made available, I believe, on the PlayStation. And it was October, and you're looking to kind of get into that mood. And my brother actually said, well, you might like it. It's kind of asymmetric, and it could be fun, but it's not usually your cup of tea. And I think since he said that, really recommending it, even though he wanted me to temper my expectations, I've probably played 500 games of Dead by Daylight. But I'm told it's not eligible for my list because it didn't come out in 2020. This was very strict rulemaking by my brother. But it's absolutely
be governed by rules.
It's absolutely fantastic. I cannot recommend it more. I think it's available on Game Pass right now. It is effectively a very technological game of hide and seek, where your actual eyeballs matter just as much as the pings or the radar or the different lights. And you can play as the survivors. It's very stressful, very tense. Or you can play as the killers. And the killers, almost like a board game, have like one specific power, but really changes the way in which they operate against any other killers. And you could just play it forever. I jokingly tell my brother, if we're just hanging out on the phone or otherwise, I can't turn the game on unless that's all I want to be doing that evening. So Dead by Daylight actually gets that kind of caution tape around it, which is like, if I have anything else I want to hit, that has to be last. So if you have any of those games in your kind of backlog or repertoire, that's Dead by Daylight right now for me. I absolutely adore it. And I blame my brother for not telling me about its existence when he could have a couple of years ago, I think.
It is decidedly not your wheelhouse. It is a pure multiplayer game. Like there's no, I can't think of another one that's in your list of like, yep, I love that pure multiplayer.
What did I love? I used to love Evolve. I really got some great feelings out of Evolve, which lasted for 2 minutes. I used to love Battleborn. I know people have heard that from me on this channel. They make fun of me for it. But Dead by Daylight is the closest I have felt to Battleborn, which is just, even though it seems so simple, it's so easy to grasp. There's so much going on in your head at any given moment, and there's so many different ways any given match can go that I just 100% adore it. I see people in the chat telling me I must be a Ghostface main, the guy from Scream. My favorite is actually the Wraith, the one with the bell that turns invisible and really just tries to intimidate people with a bell. I figure if you can intimidate someone with an orchestra piece, that means you're a pretty good killer. But in any event, that's Dead by Daylight. I love that one. Honorable mention. The next one is all you, buddy. You have to tell me what Mortal Shell even is.
Yeah, so Mortal Shell is a Souls-alike that came out, I don't actually know what part of the year. The 2020 is just a blur, but it came out at some point. I think it debuted on Epic. I actually played the demo that they released there. I just thought it was really cool, like, interesting take on the Souls-alike.
It's a Demon Souls type game, right?
Yeah, from like Demon Souls, Dark Souls. Had some cool ideas. Like you have basically, instead of doing like one character that you're building throughout the adventure for like a long time, like a Dark Souls, you actually have 4 characters that you kind of move between, and you can level them all up individually. And as you level them up, you're kind of getting their story. They're all effectively like corpses that your character takes over. They're your mortal shells. And overall, like I thought it was a really good game. Story was not great. But it's short, I think, by Souls comparison.
Okay.
But had some cool systems. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, you've mentioned that you loved it, and I wanted to make sure it was on here on the honorable mention because it is one of the few games, correct me if I'm wrong here, that you actually completed in 2020.
Yeah, I always have to say something about games I've completed because that's so rare for me.
Yeah, and if people haven't been on this channel before, we're busy folks, we're older folks. We feel like we can give an opinion on how a game ranks in how we appreciated it, what kind of utility or happiness it gave us without necessarily hitting the end line. These are not reviews. You should not take these as completely holistic looks at the games. I've talked with my brother before about potentially doing reviews like the first 12 hours or something, which is a lot of the time that I can get with most games that I play. But Mortal Shell is one of those that he has beaten, and I will never, ever beat Dead by Daylight.
Hey, Don really wants to know if you played Genshin Impact.
I have played Genshin Impact. Yeah, absolutely. It didn't make the list because I didn't really touch on it enough. I know a number of people love it, and I really like Breath of the Wild, as you might see on the list in some respects as we talk about them. But Genshin Impact seemed cool, and I was doing something else at the same time. It might have been 24 Dead by Daylight matches, to be honest, Don. We've got that going for us. Xenoblade Definitive Edition, I want to call out here. My rule for my personal list was not to put what I would consider the straight remasterings. And I know there's different art and you can get into debates on definitions of these kinds of things, but effectively the same game that is just redone nicer. So you won't see Demon's Souls on my list. You won't see Xenoblade Definitive Edition on my list, but I wanted to especially call them out because they are fantastic experiences that are better than when they originally released. But I did want to set that rule for myself in terms of telling you what my top 10 game experiences of the year are. So Xenoblade, if you don't know, is a role-playing game exclusive to Nintendo. It's one of those that has wide open environments, a lot of fun, highly recommended if you like to JRPG around with kind of little time travel elements and things along those lines. Can't recommend it more. Xenoblade 2 is also on the Switch. And so if you are interested at all in that kind of description, check it out. But it didn't make my list primarily because I played it 5 years ago or 7 years ago or whenever I played it on the Wii. The next game I'm going to give to you, Tom. This was one that we were both pretty excited about. We love Doom 2016. Why is Doom Eternal here and not on our higher list when, like the Game Awards had it in its top 5?
Doom Eternal. So Doom Eternal, as everyone knows, came out like right at the beginning of quarantine because I remember people being like, "Oh, this will be a cool thing to do while we're in quarantine." When we thought it was going to be like a month.
Very short quarantine, right? Yeah.
Yeah, just like, oh yeah, cool, I'll play that. First of all, I love Doom 2016. I love the direction that they took it with kind of rocket boots, arenas, different counters. Like I think that works really well. I think they overdid it for Doom Eternal. They had a lot of really hard counters. That basically were like, oh, if you see a Cacodemon, you better have a grenade because like you're not otherwise going to fight him, and things like that. But I didn't super appreciate. I also think the Marauder is just not a great design. He may have gotten iteration on him, but like the idea of you can't be long range and you can't be short range is like that creates this muddy middle that you want the player to sit in that they don't understand. So
you would say, from your perspective, as a game designer, you just really hate that I only have one option to do something. Is that fair?
Yeah, it feels like there's not as many options. Like there's clear counters that you're supposed to be using. And when I played Doom 2016, it was kind of like you could level up things the way that you wanted to and rely on a few weapons that you really liked or strategies that you had gotten used to. Whereas here it felt like there was a lot more, okay, I'm going to need this to deal with this threat, and I'm going to need this to deal with this threat, and then Marauders, I'm just going to pray.
Right. And I don't have that same kind of hang-up that you do in respect to design. What I really hated was that 2016's Doom, even though it was mildly satirical, felt like a world, felt like they world built. There was a narrative. It was a very kind of by the numbers kind of story, but I liked feeling in an environment. It's one of the reasons I like Doom 3 when maybe nobody else does. And I really like Doom 2016. And then somewhere between Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, they decided that they were just going to change from some kind of Event Horizon space horror into comic book rock music video. They didn't tell me they had changed until I show up on a giant floating castle outside of Earth with giant Satan symbols covering continents. And then while they had great environments and they're really cool, it just wasn't the sequel that I was looking for from a narrative perspective. And if you haven't heard me talk about video games or movies or anything before in this space, story and narrative and world building and my reason for doing something matters a lot to me when we talk about these things. And Doom Eternal kind of gave that all up from my perspective.
Yeah, I think the point you make is like I felt like Doom maybe 2016 was maybe an overly self-serious plot, but one that worked for me that I got into. I was interested in hearing like how did this work? Whereas Doom Eternal feels like it's making fun of itself too much. It's having jokes or not Borderlands style jokes, but clearly things that are supposed to be kind of humorous about this kind of like demons taking over the earth and this like one guy who can fight them.
That's true. Doom guy. Yeah, no, and so, I mean, look, as I said, narrative is very important to me. The reason why I'm playing something, the story, the drive, which is exactly why Animal Crossing is, of course, next on this list, right? It's because of that narrative element. The
narrative drive of Animal Crossing.
Exactly. The need for vengeance against Tom Nook. The drive after betrayed for debts. And the critique of capitalism and the capitalistic structure. Animal Crossing. Who wouldn't love it? No, this was actually one of those that almost made it onto my list proper. Animal Crossing on the Switch is a really fantastic piece of software. And I think one of the things that is the most interesting to me about it is how useful, how effective, how nice it has been to be in our lives in 2020 in particular. I've watched my family play this game really every day, seeing what the updates are, interacting with the people on the island, going to other people's islands that maybe they can't see because school is closed while it's locked down, or other friends, and really interacting through Animal Crossing in a way that I just think was awesome in 2020. And Nintendo, we talk about it in Virtual Legality and on this channel. They make some missteps. They do some things we don't necessarily like in terms of law and shutting down tournaments and things like that. But Animal Crossing as a program, as an application, I really do think was phenomenal. The reason it isn't on my list specifically is because it just wasn't where I personally had the most fun in terms of 10 games coming in before it. Have you played any Animal Crossing, Tom?
I think I loaded up. My wife wanted it, so we got it for her, and she was playing it, and also my daughter was into it, but it just didn't cross the threshold for me.
Sure. Well, then we'll leave it with my thoughts, and you can give us your thoughts on Among Us, one of the most popular games, and under the Dead by Daylight rule, not eligible, no matter what anybody at the Game Awards tells you.
Right. I think, so the chat said this came out in 2018. I thought it was originally released in like 2012. But
it's like a straight itch.io game. I don't know.
But yeah, Among Us is, it's a social deduction game. Basically, one of the characters or multiple of the characters are hidden imposters, and everyone's trying to kind of do some tasks, and the imposters basically want to kill everybody. And then there's like a vote after someone finds a body, or other factors can come into play. There's a vote where basically people can airlock one of the players. So if you ever played, like, I think the original social deduction game I remember was Mafia, which had
I'm a werewolf man myself.
And werewolf. So it's like you have basically assigned roles, but the whole idea is you chat for a while and then you murder somebody, and you're hoping that you murdered the right somebody. This is the same thing, but with the imposters actually having to do things while things are happening. I don't think it's not a new idea. It's not even a terribly well executed idea, but obviously it caught fire. So it's certainly a thing that you need to mention. I played it and had a lot of fun with my friends. Again, sort of to your Animal Crossing point, I've been completely out of board games because no one's getting together. And this was a really nice way for me to play with my friends and actually talk to them, joke around, lie to them. So it was good. Yeah,
and I hear what you're saying. I didn't really get into it. I did do a video on whether streaming was allowed. I do want to acknowledge Lucius Augustus was listening to you talk and decided to give us $2, either because he wanted you to stop or because he was in favor of this conversation. He said, love the videos, Hoaglaw, keep up the great content. I wanted to say I really appreciate that. I do try to make sure that I can read the folks that actually give us money for having these wonderful conversations and that drop in and chat about them with us. Someone else also asked, I believe it was Vincent here, asked me if I had played the Command & Conquer Remaster Collection. I have. I actually love that. And that was almost on the honorable mention. I think it's a fantastic remaster. I also think Age of Empires 3 is just great. So if you are into real-time strategy games, check those out. Just missed. I only wanted 10 slots on this page. As it is, we're going to be half an hour in before we even start the dueling top 10 lists. So,
yep.
We're in for the long haul here. The last item here, and maybe you can talk about this better, is I really do think a systems game design type game. It's called Other Side. It's a kind of XCOM-y type game insofar as it's a tactics battler that also has a meta strategy component, but narratively it's super weird. I don't even know that you're all dead. You're maybe not all dead. You're pre-dead.
Yeah, I think you're in the consciousness of a dying child or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
And if that's 100% accurate, I apologize if I spoiled that for anyone. I don't have any idea.
Yeah, it's just like it's given in little snippets, like in the load screen.
It's that kind of level of weird.
So what's great about it? Why is it on the list?
Other Side. Well, first of all, it's stylistically awesome. It's got a style that's basacally
black and red.
It's entirely monochrome except for red color pops, sort of like Sin City. I think was the big comparison I heard.
Sure. 20-year-old pole.
Right. It looks really cool. Also, the strategy involved with it is interesting. Like, each guy has to be dealt with in kind of a specific way, and it's very, I'm going to say Dark Souls, but like, or XCOM even, very punishing, and like, you really have to get good to do well. You really have to be like optimizing your turns and things like that. And I just really enjoyed it. Like, making progress in it felt really good.
It's really, really, really hard, right? We have to prep people for that. Really hard.
It is. I think I've gotten past the first boss, and then I think I sent you a text that was like, spoiler alert, it gets harder. Because you beat the first boss and they're like, cool, you know how to play the game now, and they just here's some new enemies that are just gonna really beat the hell out of you. Right.
But I have to admit, it is very stylistically impressive, as you say. It is a game that I remember, and though it fell off the radar, again, probably I think for another 30 games of Dead by Daylight, I do want to get back to it because I think it's a very impressive little model, and I hope that the studio that makes it, which I don't even remember, keeps going on and making more cool ideas like that one.
I'm going to check it out. I think they were like a new guy. It was like Heavyweight or something.
Okay, so that's honorable mention. Is there anything that we screwed up and left off here, Tom, that you want to change, like you wanted to change your list before this video?
The developer is Lightbulb Crew.
Lightbulb Crew. I like it.
Yeah, no, I think this was their first thing.
Nice.
I saw some people bring this up in the chat. It was one that I almost had on my list.
Okay.
So what I did want to honorably mention is Risk of Rain 2. I actually got really into. I played a lot of. I bought it like right when Gearbox announced that they were doing the publishing deal.
Every time I look at screenshots of that game, I have to take a step back because I'm not that impressed. So what is great about it?
It's just a really good kind of, I don't know, roguelike. Also, it's cooperative, which is really nice. Like, it's fun to just get in there and play with your friends. It's there's a lot of potential character builds, and the different characters that you can play very differently. So you can get a lot of mileage out of it. Also, it's got a huge kind of unlock system where you have to kind of pull off specific achievements to unlock new stuff. And it's just I don't know, it's just really fun. It's very straightforward. If you played Risk of Rain, it's the same kind of idea. If you only have 4 powers and you're kind of just cycling between those, and then you're picking up different doodads, which are going to make you better. That's sort of a roguelike standard thing of like, you're just kind of increasing in some semi-random way, and so you kind of have to improvise.
Okay, all right. I do want to acknowledge Vincent Van Vega, who gave us 10, I think it's reals. I apologize in advance. He says, I'm an intern at a small law firm here in Brazil. I'm a big fan of your content as an aspiring jurist, lovely word, and gamer. Did you play Risk of Rain 2, which you had just said that you had, and I have not, or Griftlands, which I think was the card game on Epic Game Store that I played, and then they said they were going to keep reworking. Did that eventually come out?
Griftlands is great. Griftlands is like a strange argument-based card game. It falls into kind of the Slay the Spire and that kind of.
I do love Slaying the Spire,
where you're drawing from a relatively small deck and seeing a lot of the same things and trying to put them together and manage, like, you know what their attacks are going to be, so you try to either defend or throw some different things in the way to kind of protect yourself. But it's funny because a good portion of the game you can get in physical fights is primarily arguing and like trying to.
Sounds like my cup of tea, right?
But it's arguing purely in theme. The mechanics are like arguments are effectively kind of like minions, and you're going to go and like take out their minions before they hurt you. But anyway, yeah, I love Griftlands. I think Griftlands is still technically in early access.
Yeah, I didn't think it was out yet. I'd put it on the shelf. Like, I'm not a big early access guy, so I checked it out and then I put it on the shelf. I don't know.
I think I looked at this because it's one I got into this year. But I think it hasn't officially. Yeah, it's still in early access according to Steam.
Okay, we've crossed the half-hour mark. We have to hit the lists, or we will be here all night. I know some of you wouldn't mind that, but we have to make sure that we don't get divorced or otherwise lose our families. So we are going to proceed with the lists. As you can see here, we have empty lists. I have been very, very fancily putting together empty lists so that we can talk about these one at a time, judge each other, and you can get a little bit of that Hoeg brotherly love as part of this conversation. Tom, are you ready for your number 10?
Sure. Yeah, I was curious. So is this okay? We're gonna go 10-1.
We're gonna go 10-1. We're gonna alternate between you and I, and these will be things that if it's already appeared on another person's list, we can skip the long form conversation. But I think this will be fun. Are you ready? Oh, somebody's yelling Monster Train. I know you played that one.
But that was me yelling it, but someone said that they had played it.
All right. You ready for your number 10?
I am.
All right. Number 10 from Tom's list, the not at all controversial Game Awards winning.
I forgot what my number 10 was.
The Last of Us Part 2, which I, of course, offended by not even including the word part. I don't know whether Neil Druckmann will have me to any cocktail parties. Although if you've been in this channel, you know that my 2 videos on The Last of Us Part 2 would suggest I wouldn't be invited to those parties anyway. Tom, why is The Last of Us Part 2 number 10 on your Game of the Year list?
It's interesting because I knew this one's going to be divisive in like both ways. Like the Last of Us 2 fans are pissed that I put it so low, and the Last of Us 2 critics are like, "Why is it on your list at all?"
It's not on my list.
I believe that. I think that the reason I want to recognize it is I think it does a lot of stuff really well. It's very cinematic. It's insanely detailed.
Yes.
The rope system was a really new thing.
The non-game designers, if anybody's like me, I have trouble with this. I read a whole article about how the rope's amazing. Have we not used ropes before? What's new about the rope?
It's physically simulated.
Okay.
And still allows your character to use it, so you can throw it over stuff or swing from it, or all those different things. They did a lot of interesting puzzles with it.
Okay.
In terms of you've got to get the rope over here,
throw it over the beam and things. Yeah.
Yeah. So Uncharted 4 may have done rope. I didn't actually play that.
Not according to the articles. I don't know.
The rope in Last of Us 2 was a cool mechanic. Generally, like I said, I think they produced a lot of really cool set pieces. There's one I remember telling you about that with they're riding a horse through do we do a spoiler?
Do it without context. So that's the other thing I should have mentioned up top. We're not going to get narrative spoilers here. We are going to talk in broad strokes about things we'd liked or disliked about narratives. So if you're that sensitive to spoilers, be aware of that. But we're not going to do contextual, this person died, this person killed this person, or anything else in the rest of our list.
Yeah, so
you were talking about horses. Horse riding impressive.
You're riding a horse through an ongoing battle in this city in flames and stuff, and it's just I remember seeing that and going, just damn.
Yeah, no, it's a very cool scene. It might be the prettiest game ever made. People get on me for that, but in terms of detail and the actual image quality of what's on your screen at any given time, I say pretty, of course, only for visuals and not the emotions or narrative that you will feel or see. But visually, it's very, very impressive.
Yeah, so narratively, I think it was not great. Definitely preferred the original one.
Yeah. I love the original. Love it.
Yeah. And I think my feeling was actually, as I played through The Last of Us 2, that it was quite repetitive. Yeah. It just felt like you were doing the same thing, especially in terms of hey, there's a building over there that's really small, and we're going to walk towards that. Occasionally they would break it up in interesting ways. I liked using a boat to basically go through the canals of Seattle. I thought that was kind of a fun thing.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it did a lot of really good stuff, really polished. I'm glad I played it.
And I will probably never be part of the discussion. Yeah.
And I will probably never revisit it.
Yeah, I deleted it pretty quickly. I mean, as people know, if this is your first visit, you might not, so I'll give you the high-level view here. I found the narrative and the writing and the character motivations to be very wanting, and the pacing with what they do, which, again, we won't spoil things, but that it loops back on itself, and you wind up seeing the same thing a number of times, and narratively that can work. Certainly there are a lot of really famous, very important narrative works that have had different perspectives on repeating events. But in my opinion, Last of Us really just didn't offer that different perspective, and the repetition just didn't help. And at the end of the day, you have characters doing things that I don't believe, even as they were written in the game, they would do in any given moment. And so if you're interested in more of my thoughts, I think I talk about it for an hour. There's a video here on the channel called It Can Be For Nothing. Just kind of giving away the game there in the title. But you can check that out. And yeah, it's... I described it when I was talking about that video as a good game spoiled, because there's a lot to like in that game in terms of how you play it, the detail, and what you're actually doing moment to moment, and just in the service of nothing in terms of a story. And if you're going to have a cinematic game, that kills it for me. It obviously lowered it in its esteem for you to bring it in at 10. And I really just wish it were as great as the first one, because the first one really is one of my favorite games ever.
Yep, no, I agree. I think... like we were saying, Last of Us, probably the only issue I have with Last of Us is the sort of ludonarrative dissonance right at the end.
Woohoo! Fancy.
Yeah, I know. But I think that... sorry, I got distracted by chat because that's what I do.
See? Don't read the chat. Don't distract my brother, chat.
I want to be able to respond.
They're going to put all caps directly to you now, just to throw you off your train.
Mostly complaining about ropes, it would seem.
Okay.
But yes, the narrative of Last of Us 2, especially kind of what I'll call the epilogue, just felt very hollow.
Yeah. Well, and fair enough, right? Fair enough. Well, as I said, as I whispered, it's not going to appear on my list, folks. It also didn't appear on my honorable mention if it hadn't appeared on Tom's list. But here we are. Number 10 for Rick. I'm not at all divisive either. It's Marvel's The Avengers. So The Avengers has obviously gotten a lot of criticism and a lot of flack, really, online. I think it has like 800 concurrent players on Steam, and it's largely thought to be a failure in terms of a live service game. And Square put out a financial report that said, I don't know, they're down $60 million on it right now from the production and what they sold. But as a game, especially if you're just playing it through the campaign, I really found it to be very fun. And I found the distinction between the characters, the different builds of the 6 Avengers in the box, and now a 7th in Kate Bishop, the archer, that they've added since. They're just all very, very different. They have very different play styles, and it really is fun to see the other Avengers flying around or stomping around in terms of Hulk. And we've had fun playing it together. And yeah, it's not the brainiest game in the world. You beat up robots, you get some loot, you go beat up the next robots. They need to work on their end game, that live service model that they're doing. They need to get all that to be a little bit more compelling, a little bit more like a Destiny, in all honesty. But the campaign I liked better than any of the Destiny campaigns that I played. And the actual moment-to-moment gameplay I find gratifying. So that's why Avengers is number 10 on my list. I know you have played this. Are you going to defend me? Or are you going to cast me down, Tom?
I will, I think, largely defend you. I remember this was completely off my radar, and then we played the demo, and it was like, oh, cool. Like, this is kind of a fun, simple thing. It's not, it's cool. When it gets it right, it's cool. Like, when you hit the right thing and you've got, like, Hulk runs in and grabs a guy and is smashing him while Iron Man's flying around shooting guys, and those are all controlled by players. Like, that's really a cool feeling. At the same time,
there's no reason to play it. The matchmaking doesn't work, and the graphics sometimes break.
Yeah, the campaign was kind of, people. I think a lot of people compared it to Anthem, and I don't think it was that bad. Anthem was just a huge tire fire, but. I think that the Avengers game kind of offered some fun stuff, but yeah, it was kind of broken. It, a lot of stuff didn't work, and then probably the biggest thing is, just the end game's not there. So like I played through the campaign, and then I was just done with it.
Yeah.
And I think that
get
it's
you.
clearly set up for that. And, not having that feels like a big miss.
It's just I agree with you completely, by the way. It's not there. The drive isn't there. The loot or whatever isn't there. Obviously, the fact that you can't cosmetically change your person with loot is like an impact on the Skinner box and the drive to doing those kinds of things. You don't get that in Destiny. Instead, you wind up calling me because you got a Santa sleigh in Destiny and everybody's happy.
Oh, God, my sleigh is so great.
Right. You got a Santa sleigh. So I get all of that. I guess for me, it's like I almost got the value of my dollars out from playing the campaign like any other campaign. And so they try to do more. They don't have it right just yet. I give them credit for what they've done. And people come at this from different perspective, I think. But that's why Avengers is on my top 10 list. And so in our 10 slots, we have The Last of Us Part 2 and The Avengers. So we're going to get the downvotes already just from number 10. Are you ready for number 9, Tom?
There's been no downvotes yet. The upvotes keep coming.
All right. Well, see, now why did you say that? You know you're going to get a downvote now, right?
I'm watching to see the little thumbs down to start counting.
All right. Here's Tom's number 9. It's Cyberpunk 2077. We are only dealing with the least divisive games of the entire year here at the bottom of our lists. Cyberpunk 2077 came out, or did it, about a week ago. Why is it on your list?
So Cyberpunk, it's funny because we'll get to a different game on my list where I said earlier to a friend that this was the most broken game I've loved. And then Cyberpunk came out and it's kind of like, I don't know. We'll talk about this, and if it's on your list, Cyberpunk, the big cool thing about Cyberpunk is the world. The Night City world, the Badlands, all that they've built there is just, it's the most, I think, immersive place I've been in a game. It's not a place you really necessarily want to be.
It's not a happy.
But you're completely immersed there. And I think that's amazing. I think that, to be honest, like, I want to try to basically say, like, if you can pull the bugs out of it, and that's, one, that's not necessarily fair because it's like you ship this. On the other hand, it's like, if at the end of the day you fix all of it, like, what am I supposed to feel? Do I rate No Man's Sky based on the way it was, 4 years ago, or do I rate it what it is now? But I think Cyberpunk has a lot of promise. There's pieces that I like, and I just think, what do I want to say about it? I have good hopes for it.
That it'll be fixed up.
I like the narrative pieces. I like the character building pieces. I have a pretty good feeling about CD Projekt Red. Like, I think that they frankly can't afford for it to not do well. So obviously, right now they're in the shit. But eventually,
trust by level of damning that they would have if they don't fix it. Yeah, I like that.
Right. Oh, someone asked, what am I playing Cyberpunk on? So I'm playing Cyberpunk on the Series X. On the quality setting, and so it's a solid 30 frames per second, which normally would really bother me. But it, like, with the quality 30 frames per second on the Series X, like, it holds together. It looks really nice. One of the things that I've talked with Rick about is, like, it's got this light refractive thing so that it looks like actual fog and mist. And
all the people in chat giving you crap. It looks fantastic and 100% is breathtaking. I mean that sincerely. On a number of scores, when you turn the corner and you see the two giant things bellowing fire and steam into the air, and there's 60 people walking around you on the Xbox Series X, it's very, very impressive. The reason it isn't on my list is primarily because even if we assume the bugs go away and the game comes out just fine on the other end, design-wise, I have actually not been as happy with it as I had hoped. And that largely comes from the quest structure. There's a lot of filler quests. It winds up feeling a lot more like a Grand Theft Auto or a Ubisoft game. And I love The Witcher 3 to death. I love it to death. And really why I love it that much is because every bit of the world feels like you roll into a new town, you get a new contract, you get a big old story that would be a short story in any other game. Cyberpunk doesn't really have that. It has some, but at the end of the day, most of your interactions are essentially going to some place, hacking some people's heads, shooting them in the face, getting an email, getting $2,000, and then going to the next place to do that. So it winds up feeling to me like when it's finished, assuming that it is, and it's not right now. So everybody that's complaining, it's not right now. We acknowledge that. Once it's finished, I still think it's like an 8 out of 10 for me. It's like a nice Far Cry, like a city that is amazing, that has a Far Cry game built into it with a bit of narrative, but it doesn't seem like a ton. They really streamlined the mainline story. And so that's why it doesn't appear in my list. It's not really because they released something that's completely broken, because to be 100% honest, I can't judge it on everybody else's experiences. I haven't had that much trouble on the Series X. So as it stands, it's just not the game I thought it was when they've been pitching it for the last 3 years.
Yeah, obviously I was excited for this one, so I also have a tilt. And for the Witcher comparison, like I have never gotten really far into The Witcher 3. I've played each of them decent amounts, but I got into Witcher 3 actually this year, and played through kind of the first act, I think, or what I would call the first act, depending on how you cut things. And that game's amazing from a pure narrative standpoint, like the narratives that you go through. I don't think the actual gameplay of like the sword fighting and stuff is particularly great. I think it's serviceable. I think it gets you through.
How did we wind up with you criticizing one of my favorite games ever? Why did this become a Witcher referendum?
I thought that's what this is about. Whereas, Cyberpunk. So, and the reason I brought it up also is because, for me, science fiction, I think is always going to trump dark fantasy in terms of what I'm interested in. I like hacking. I like cyberspace. I like all those kind of things. I played Shadowrun. We were talking about the Netrunner card game and things like that. Great, I really dig that stuff. So, and I think that the the shooting in Cyberpunk is still kind of rough. Like it's not up there with a good first person shooter, but I still find it more compelling than the sword fighting in Witcher.
Okay, all right, fair enough. You can criticize Witcher all you want. Cyberpunk is going to take a while to get fixed up. But once it does, it's going to be a perfectly fine game. I just wish I liked it more.
That's true. And also, I will admit that other things on this list are taking... I haven't played Cyberpunk again in a while because of other things on this list that I'm playing instead.
All right. Well, since we haven't been controversial at all, let's see what I had on number 9 and remind myself. It's Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which, if you've been following this channel for a while, is actually something of a surprise, because Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the immediately prior Assassin's Creed, was actually our number 1 game of the year for 2018. I really love Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and a number of people just put it in the Assassin's Creed box, and that's fine. But that game was, I think, really special and was, in all honesty, the best BioWare RPG to come out since BioWare turned into a different company. Assassin's Creed Valhalla takes a different tack. It tries to streamline things a bit. I've still been enjoying it quite a lot. It deserves its place at number 9. Certainly in terms of tilt, I might just not like being a Viking as much as I like ancient Greece, but also they got rid of a lot of that side quest depth. They got rid of a lot of those kind of optional conversation things, and really changed up the way the game operates. And medieval England isn't as exciting to me as the Peloponnesian Wars. So it's really a very idiosyncratic review of Assassin's Creed Valhalla as against Assassin's Creed Odyssey. But while I like it, I just don't think it matches up quite as well with that earlier game. How are you liking it, Tom?
Yeah, I think that's the same for me, and that's why I didn't make my list. Is like it didn't feel like it was doing anything dramatically different. It felt like actually a step back from Odyssey. I think being a Viking is cool, but I just remember having much fonder feelings for Odyssey. Odyssey definitely feels bigger. We joke about the term, they use the word Odyssey.
It feels Homeric.
It's a perfect title for that game because it's so big. You're doing so much. And I agree also, like, you'd say Assassin's Creed Odyssey was kind of Witcherified in terms of like how they wanted to.
I think it was Teens Witcher. Teen Witcher. Yeah.
Baby's first Witcher.
Yeah, I think Origins was Baby's first Witcher, yeah.
But I think So that's why Valhalla didn't make my list.
Okay.
It's perfectly good. I mean, Ubisoft games tend to be of a decent quality. They've basically
As long as you like Ubi game, yeah.
Right. It seems like they've only been making one game and just different skins on top of it for a while now. I would even go so far as to be like, sorry, I was thinking of Forza Horizon, but that's not them.
Right. That's true.
No, feeling like an Ubi game to me. Like you go and you get the quests and stuff. But
okay.
Yeah. So I think it did not do enough for me this year to kind of get on there, even though I think it's pretty decent. Also, like we're talking about bugs and stuff, like the tearing issue on the Series X just really drives me crazy.
Yeah, I can understand that.
There's other games that do that too. I don't know what that's about. I hope that Microsoft or whoever fixes it. I don't know if it's just that they had variable refresh rate and they're just like, we don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, it looks fine.
I don't have a variable refresh rate TV, so
yeah. Well, that's fair. I think all of your comments on Assassin's Creed Valhalla are fair. We could talk about this particular game for a much longer time. I think they'd make some interesting design choices about not having really loot out there as much and actually having you build that up. I think is really cool. Yeah, it's my number 9 game. And so we're getting there. We're getting there, folks. We're up to number 8 for Tom, which is, do you remember what your number 8 is, Tom?
No, well, just show it to me.
Right.
What I was going to say is also that Valhalla, you pointed out, it's like you get specific gear and you kind of level it up, and I just inherently don't like that as much as like finding cool loot.
Yep, I get that. All right, I've clicked on your number 8, and a random word has appeared. The word is Wolcen. What does it mean?
This may get downvotes. So Wolcen, Lords of Mayhem.
Don't try to please the chat, Tom.
Was a divisive game when it came out. It has a very similar... So this is the game that I was saying I've never loved a game that's so broken. And it totally is. And then Cyberpunk came out, and I was like, no, Wilson's pretty good.
So you got them right next to each other, happily sitting next to each other on the list.
I know. So obviously, I like dungeon crawlers in general. I like to see basically ones that aren't Diablo. Wolcen, particularly, the reason I attached to it, I think, is it's more action-oriented. It's like you're basically dodging out of things. You're far more kind of using skills in real time. It's not just about like DPS. It's actually like moving around the space and prioritizing targets and things like that, which I enjoyed. Also, while the story is not anything to really write home about, it's displayed in a very cinematic way. Like they're doing camera shots that are like at the character's level, and like a lot of different things like that I really appreciated. Like it felt like a more cinematic action RPG, and that's kind of why it's here. Also, I like the way that their skills work out and how you can develop like very different characters.
Okay.
In a largely
PC only,
classless,
right?
I assume, yeah.
Okay.
It's classless. It's a classless system.
Okay,
but
like
with a lot
Path of Exile.
Yeah, with a lot of depth to it. So, like, yeah, Path of Exile, actually, I finished Wolcen and I went over to Path of Exile because everyone raves about it.
Yeah,
and Path of Exile, I think, may have been awesome at one point, and I'm definitely interested in version 2, but it seems like it's become so, I don't know what the right word is, streamlined, that, like, Path of Exile 2 now is just a few people that can really race at the beginning of every season, and it feels like the people that are just encountering it for the first time, it's like weird. It's like not being really pushed to you as much as, no, everyone's played this already. It's just about what's the seasonal event and how do I do it. But at the same time, Path of Exile has a lot of really cool systems. I like the ability slotting. I like the things that they're doing. I watched the videos on Path of Exile 2 and the improvements that they're making, and I think that game's going to be great whenever it comes out.
Fantastic. Well, hey, look, I haven't played it, so I don't have a lot to comment on other than that, but I like how eclectic the bottom of your list is turning out. So, I mean, that's pretty good. Let's see what my number 8 was. It's Astro's Playroom. That's right. Number 8 on my list is a free thing that comes with the PlayStation 5, but I have to be honest with you. First of all, if you haven't played any Astro games, Astrobot Rescue Mission on PlayStation VR is one of my favorite games on any VR platform. But Astro's Playroom did a couple of really great things, one of which I love as a gamer, one of which I love as a business guy. And that is that, one, it's an Astro game, so it plays like a Mario platformer, and has so much character in each of its little areas. Got it for free with the PlayStation 5. And then from the business perspective, it really tries to make you feel good about your PlayStation purchase and your investment in the PlayStation ecosystem. The entirety of the game features effectively cameos from places in PlayStation history, like God of War or Bloodborne or Metal Gear Solid. All of them have like little astrobots doing their various things from those games that you can go find as like little things. And then you collect effectively old PlayStations and old peripherals, all while there's really fun music. And me and my girls, when the PlayStation 5 came out, had such a great time. It's only like 4 or 5 hours maybe to get everything in it. But I really, really loved it. In making this list, it was just one of those things where I had so much fun for a couple nights, maybe even 3, that it had to be on the list because it's so great. And I really want to see the Astrobot people do a really big game, because I think Sony's finally found the mascot that they've basically been looking for since the dawn of the PlayStation, and I would love to see more Astrobot games in general.
So I want to pause for a second before I respond. There's someone in the chat that's asking you to shout out to people. I assume it's you.
Don't shout those out. Thank you, chat. Tom, just sound those out in your head at some point.
Oh!
Yeah.
Okay.
Nailed it, buddy.
See, I'm very internet.
You leave the chat to me.
I just like almost a shout out. They're really big fans. I'm like, okay, cool, let's do that. Didn't.
See, that's that's where you got tripped up. You see, there are no really big fans of lawyers. Once you walk in with that,
I thought you might have a few big fans, and now I feel like an idiot. I don't spend enough time on the internet, apparently.
No, that's fair. That's fair. No, totally understandable. Totally understandable.
So, Astro's Playroom, obviously it's a pack-in.
Yeah, they're telling me it's not free. It was $500, but I was getting that PlayStation 5 anyway.
It leverages a lot of nostalgia, I think, in a fun way. But other than that, I think it's like a decent tech demo that they could maybe do something with. I felt the same way about Astrobot Rescue. I think it's just like, yeah, it's decent. I don't love its art style.
Oh man, but, that hurts.
It's
this is
fine.
The worst part of the debate. I'm going to come hard on Last of Us now.
Feel free, and the chat wants you to. It's just like, it's fine. It's a tech demo. It looks like a lot of the technical demos that PlayStation's done in the past. You know, like VR Worlds, for instance, is like a solid, like that little Pong game that you play with your face. You know, that's really cool. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's a great game overall. It's just like a cool, like this tech could do some interesting stuff, and we should look forward to it. But the Astro's Playroom is just like, eh.
It's very sad. I don't know what to tell you about this. This is all very. I've opened my eyes here, really, folks in chat. Everybody else watching this video, my brother doesn't like Astro's Playroom. It's an affront to justice in the American way. So I apologize in advance.
Just so we're clear, there's a platformer on my top 10 list that I think is also on your top 10 list and does a better job.
Okay, all right. Well, I do want to shout out Chris Black. Good evening, Rick. I love your contents and keep up your great works. By the way, you are hitting 30,000 subs, and I wish you reach it very soon. I very much appreciate that. I am so thrilled with the growth of the channel this year. Not in my wildest dreams could I have thought we would hit 30,000 subs by the end of the year, and it does look like that's, if not likely, at least a possibility. So I'm very, very excited about that. Thank you so much for supporting the channel and for all the great thoughts that everybody has really given to me and the channel and to THABTO and to ask to have Tom back. Really throughout the year. 2020 has been quite a thing, but this channel has been a shining spot within it. Now, moving on from the absolute heresy and betrayal of Tom's thoughts on Astro's Playroom, let's see what his great number 7 is, shall we?
What is my great number 7?
It's Immortals, Phoenix Rising. Now, Tom's going to give a caveat here, and we're going to talk about it, but if you weren't expecting it, or if you don't recognize the name of the game, this is the game formerly known as Gods and Monsters. And we did a video on Virtual Legality about maybe Monster Energy suing them for a trademark violation, got them to change their name. They denied it. They actually responded directly to Hoeg Law, which was wild. But either way, the resulting game has a name that I don't love, and I continue to think of it as Gods and Monsters in my head, but Tom has it as number 7. It will be appearing on my list as well. What's great about Immortals, Tom?
So Immortals is a Breath of the Wild style game, but obviously I think at a higher fidelity that I really appreciate. I actually am one of the people that didn't like super play Breath of the Wild when the Switch came out.
Right.
I've heard great things. It just like there's only so much time. And so I actually got into it a little this year on a trip where all I had was my Switch, and so I was playing Breath of the Wild. And I'm like, okay, I see why people like this. I see what's interesting here. And I think Immortals does something very, it does something very similar, obviously, and I think it does a good job with it. I think that it's, I love its art style. I love its world.
We like Greek myths. We both do.
Right. I love Greek myths, and I love the just like, we talk about this, like there's just color there that I really appreciate. And everything in sort of everything modern seems desaturated. And I like being in that space. I think it's got some cool ideas. I've done some puzzles that I actually thought were like interesting.
Oh yeah, they're great.
Which is real unusual. It seems like this day and age in terms of like figuring out, all right, I got to get this to there. Obviously there's your portals and whatnot, but they're pretty uncommon, especially in a game that is not specifically kind of focused on it. I'm really enjoying it. This actually, I was playing it this morning. And it was kind of rising up my list, and I wanted to push it, I think, one more slot, but Rick said, no, the slides are done.
I did. He tried to change it right before this video, and I was like, no, I did too many slides.
Slides are done. You'll have to live with it.
So it might be a little bit higher in Tom's estimation. Before we talk a little bit more about Immortals, I did want to acknowledge Brandon Vic Boss Morgan, who says, I don't agree with the list so far, but I do love your channel. I assume that was directed at Tom not liking Astro's Playroom. It's understandable. Thank you for giving the money. Anyway, I try to keep Tom on a short leash, but he just says what he wants. No comment from Tom. I love it. We'll press on from there. Yeah, Immortals is Breath of the Wild. It straight up is. We can say inspired by, but it takes the Breath of the Wild engine and makes very few changes before putting it out into the world. What it does, though, is it helps polish that. Not only with high-definition graphics, which is just nice to see, right? You're used to Breath of the Wild, and look, we all accept Switch graphics because it's the Switch, but Breath of the Wild would look better with high-definition graphics, and Immortals basically shows that, even with a completely different art style, which tends to remind me of Fortnite, in all honesty. But that game is an exploration dream. It's wonderful to just go into various places. You can play it with your kids in the room. You can do it while you're talking to your brother on the phone, I know. And you can just pick 3 things and go get them and grow your character, all while getting some really interesting kind of deep cut Greek mythology references that they do pretty well. There's some humor that maybe doesn't land quite as we would hope, but mostly it's pretty good humor. It's pretty well written in a beautiful world with a great combat system, with a lot of fun puzzles to solve and a lot of great enemies to fight. I don't know what else you'd be looking for. Immortals Fenyx Rising is the best game to release in December of this year.
That may be accurate.
Well, I wouldn't have thought that about 2 weeks ago, but yeah, no, I really think it is. Immortals Fenyx Rising is something special. It appears on your number 7, and it will be appearing on my list. So this isn't as much of a debate as just kind of a fawning over. But yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No. I was going to say is like, I want more non-Nintendo companies to make Zelda-like games. I love Darksiders. I loved Immortals. I think generally, Nintendo found something great, and people don't want the response of, oh, Immortals is just Breath of the Wild.
And that's exactly what I was going to comment on. Yeah, as you and I don't mind, hey, that was a really great set of ideas. We're going to do our own spin on it. Even if you could say, like, I can see exactly where you were inspired from. There seems to be a lot of publishers and developers that just don't like that. They don't want to have that conversation at all. Whereas in many respects, I think some of the tweaks that Immortals does improve Breath of the Wild. Like, they would be better if Breath of the Wild 2 were to incorporate them. And so I love that iteration. So much software development depends on that iteration. And game developers still kind of be like, oh, there was the longest time where you had first-person shooters and like nobody could decide on the control scheme, even when like a couple of them started to really shine. And it's just like, yeah, no, Breath of the Wild is a great model. It's a great type of game. Let's make a lot of them, because there's a lot of different things you could do just with that as a structure.
Yeah, I just like... I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think, most games, a lot of games, obviously, that people could say, oh, this is my favorite, or this is the best, or whatever, is, like, I could point you to the game that it was inspired by. Maybe not something as popular as Breath of the Wild, obviously, but, like, the game development is iterative. It's not, most of the time, occasionally you get things that are just completely new, never before seen. But then, like, I think we were talking about, like, Slay the Spire in terms of one of the honorable mentions earlier, and I think Slay the Spire is the first one I can think of. I don't know if there are other deck-building kind of games that came before it, but now there are a ton. For instance, Monster Train, which came up and I love, but it's clearly based on, like, this is the general concept, and then kind of evolving from there. You're going to be going through an FTL-style map, and maybe you go to that, because FTL, I think, precedes... Slay the Spire. So it's like, okay, this is how we're going to handle, moving through a space with kind of a decent number of choices as you progress to how you're going to get rewards and things like that. And now a lot of games do it.
Yeah, I think smaller companies might be a little bit more willing to. I don't know.
So I guess, like, similarity doesn't bother me, especially if I think you're doing a better game, or you're making improvements on it. You're not just copying it, or you're going in a different, maybe it's not an improvement even, as just a different direction. But Immortals, I'm enjoying much more than I expected to. I picked it up on sale like yesterday or like 2 days ago, like 30% off on Xbox. So
all right,
check that out.
Microsoft, please send the checks to Hoeg Law. Yeah, no, it's.
I think it's also on a 30% off sale on Epic plus your $10 coupon.
All right,
if you don't mind using Epic.
Do you have stock in Ubisoft?
I just I like sharing deals. I like yeah.
It is on sale already. Yes, I had a very expensive rental
trial period,
but it's a great game.
It is weird, but yes.
It's a great game. No, I mean, that's the funny thing about Immortals is they kind of sent it out to die. Like, I don't know that there was a ton of faith for the project at Ubisoft in terms of Legion and then Valhalla and then Immortals and then that December, whatever it was, 5th release date. But it is great, and I highly recommend it to everybody. Let's take a look at my number 7, Miles Morales. If you haven't played this, if you haven't seen the videos that I did talking about whether or not it was going to be what they were saying it was going to be when Sony originally announced it, Miles Morales is a really nice showpiece for the PlayStation 5. It's got a lot of cool graphic bells and whistles. But more importantly than that, Spider-Man 2018 was, I think it was our number 3 game of the year. I really, really loved it. And Miles Morales is the next iteration of that. A few more skills, a few more things to think about in each and every fight. A little bit fancier world with snow falling and Christmas lights everywhere. And a really nice narrative. And one of the things that comes up, especially with us getting older, is this notion of what is too long, what is too short. And game publishers seemingly needing to hit an hours number in order to justify the dollars that they have collected, when this really wasn't the case when Tom and I were kids, right? Chrono Trigger, which is on, I think, both of our top 5 lists, is 12 hours long, 14 hours long, I don't know. It's very, very short. And there are other games like that where you just got the value out of it. The original God of War, that game that launched a series on the PlayStation, I think is maybe 6 hours long. But it was great, and it was an enjoyable game to play. Miles Morales, I think I wound up playing beginning to end with like half of the side stuff done in something like a dozen hours. But it was a game that I was able to enjoy with my daughter, who really loved the story, said that she had goosebumps at the end. It had a beginning, middle, and end that was really very nice. Very felt like, I don't know, maybe a mid-range streaming service series of some kind. And it didn't result in essentially the Assassin's Creed Valhalla of it all, which is that you can spend 10 hours in like a single like province in Valhalla and get a nice little story out of that province. But if you're going to beat Valhalla or any Assassin's Creed in the last 10 years, you're going to spend 100 hours doing it. And Miles Morales doesn't demand that of you, and I think the character work was really nice. I think Insomniac really knows what kind of Spider-Man universe they're building, and on top of all of that, they have just a fantastic combat system that really didn't change a ton since 2018, but was very easy to have present on my list.
Yeah, I can't comment on this one much because I haven't played it. I never actually finished Marvel Spider-Man.
Okay.
Originally, but I loved what I did play, and now I have kind of the higher end version or the next gen version.
Yeah.
I already started playing, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I forgot how good this feels.
With weird Peter Parker, yeah.
So I can't really argue with it, with the exception of knowing how big the content is and how quality the content is. But like the core of it, the Marvel Spider-Man by Insomniac is phenomenal. Like I don't think you can argue that. It's probably one of the best superhero games ever, and
yeah, you're gonna have your Batman versus your Spider-Man fights. I mean, that's what you're gonna have. The
best Spider-Man game probably ever.
The best Spider-Man, the remaster, the 2018. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Spider-Man 2018 is fantastic, and as you play that, you're only gonna love it more because they stick to their guns in terms of actually telling a story, and they don't kind of lose the plot, which is something that happens in some games, whether it's for budget or just getting it out the door or what have you. Insomniac knows what they're doing. And with the full disclaimer, of course, that you are ex-Insomniac, which I should probably throw out there when we say things about Insomniac games.
That's fair.
But it's a fantastic game. Highly recommend it to everybody that's interested in Spider-Man, although you should probably start with the original if you haven't played that one at all. Number 6 on Tom's list, what's it going to be? It's Demon's Souls. You heard me give the disclaimer up at the top that this wasn't eligible for my list just in terms of the own internal rules that I was setting. But Tom, why does Demon's Souls make it almost into your top 5 games of all of 2020?
I thought I think the remaster was done very well. And that's kind of one of the things that I look at. Yeah. It's beautiful. I think it was done with a real eye towards the content originally and sort of like that, what we wanted it to look like, and we're limited by technology. So I've been super happy with it. I do love Souls games in general. Mm-hmm. I usually get nowhere in them because
we heard you talk about Mortal Shell. Yeah.
Yeah, right. We talked about Mortal Shell in the honorable mentions. I'm just not good enough, but they do appeal to me. And Demon's Souls, obviously as kind of the originator, it's funny because I don't remember exactly when it came out. What, 2000? I don't know.
The original Demon's Souls? I don't know. It's almost a decade, I think.
You were like, oh, you have to check this out. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I stayed up to like 3 a.m. playing it, like the first time. I think you actually might have come down and I was still awake and you're like, what is going on? And it just immediately grabbed me. And so this one does in a similar way.
Thank you, Stephanie Hansen. 2009 was the release date.
So that sounds about right. So I really enjoy the remaster, partially because I never got that far in the original, but I do remember some of the pieces that I'm at, but also because I think literally the fidelity makes the game more playable. Like the telegraphs are more clear. The vulnerable parts of the enemies are more obvious. And so some people would say, oh, that makes it too easy, or whatever. I like a challenge, but I don't like a challenge that ultimately like I can't really get through. And I don't know if I need to push harder on sort of the Dark Souls, because I probably could. I've gotten much better at Souls games in general over time. So I think I could probably go back and make more progress on those. But Demon's Souls is just like, it's a great model that I really love. It looks great. It actually has a stronger story, I would say, than the follow-ups. Like
you're gonna you're gonna get hate speech on this. You mean a stronger, more direct narrative?
I mean that it tells a story. You are here to do these things, and these are the bad guys. And
there's like an entire Reddit thread that's like just devoted to figuring out Dark Souls or Bloodborne or anything else. So Demon Souls doesn't need that.
Right, and that's fine. You can look at the item descriptions, and like try to figure out what the hell the plot is. But at the very least, I feel like here, like, we pretty much sold it to you. And as you encounter characters, they're talking about these characters that you'll meet. And yeah, I've had a lot of fun with it. Really enjoyed it. I'm trying to think. Maybe my top PS5 game of the year.
Yeah, could be.
Just 'cause that's just well, I guess it's an exclusive, right? So
yeah, you mean from an exclusive standpoint? I don't remember what your first 5 are. So we'll see what they are. No, Demon Souls is great, and it is a very, very faithful remake of the original. And really, you get like these muscle memories and things of you remembering how you played it. I guess 11 years ago, but it was a lot of fun, and you've gotten further in it than I have in this latest iteration. But I didn't want to put just the flat remasters on my list, so that's why it's not on mine. But I can't deny that it's a very, very good game in 2020. My number 6.
I think an 11-year-old remaster like skips that. It's not like they remastered it from like 2 years ago.
Okay. All right. So you don't. Spider-Man is ineligible. You would have Demon Souls be fine.
Right. Spider-Man is like 1 year. I can't. No, you already got your credit last year, Spider-Man.
Okay, it's time for 13 Sentinels, which might not be a game that everybody's familiar with. This is a game from a company called Vanillaware that makes really cool graphics and has for a very long time. And I've enjoyed them in a number of different games. Odin's Sphere, Dragon's Crown, I think, Grimoire. Yeah, a number of other games like that. This is the first time that they've really focused on telling a story. And they've focused on it so much that I would suspect that a number of you, and maybe even my brother, would look at this game and say it's primarily kind of a visual novel. You have these cool characters doing these cool things, but you're mostly listening to them talk. You don't necessarily have a lot of things to decide other than where in the world is the next piece of the story. And on top of that, there is a kind of combat real-time strategy game that would make more sense if we really dive deep into the narrative of the game. But the narrative, without spoiling anything, is really why it appears at number 6 on my list. It is basically a mishmash melange of every science fiction trope, conceit, 80s movie, anything that you can think of, they have built into their story. So like an Octopath Traveler, 13 Sentinels refers to 13 different characters, and you can proceed through their stories in almost any order. There's kind of roadblocks and gates that the game puts up so that you make sure that you've seen something before there's a big reveal somewhere else. But the effect of this is that it winds up feeling like everybody is in their own science fiction movie, and for the longest time while you're playing this game, you can't imagine how these things are going to line up. There's somebody that might be on a time travel quest. There's somebody that might be dealing with alien life. There's someone that might or might not be a clone. There's androids. There might be a witch. There could be ghosts. Who knows in this game? But what really, really works about the 13 Sentinel story is that by the time you get maybe halfway through, you have a fairly good understanding of how everybody connects, what the world is, why the story is the way that it is. But what really makes it great is that for that second half of the game, when you think you understand what's happening, they can still throw a dozen twists at you and give you a greater understanding of what you've seen in just the most wonderful Black Mirror, Twilight Zone, anything else that you could think of. M. Night Shyamalan when he's making one of his 2 decent movies per decade. It's great from a narrative perspective, and it really scratches that itch for someone like me that really loved like the 999 series, whatever that Virtue's Last Reward. I have to remember the phrases that some of these games use to name themselves. I love 13 Sentinels. I am so thrilled to see Vanillaware get that art in a game like this, and I really couldn't recommend it more. It is something of an acquired taste in terms of you have to have at least a willingness to accept anime conceits and some kind of anime characterizations. There's some fan service and some other stuff that might rub folks the wrong way. Outside of that, it is maybe my favorite story presented in video games this year, and I can only tell you, you get to the later stages of that game, and it's pretty unbelievable exactly the story that they have told. So my highest recommendation.
So this one appears on my list as well. How do you want to do that? Should I talk about it now?
Yeah, talk about it now. I talked about Immortals, and if we hit it, you're on your list, you could talk about it a little bit more, but we won't do the big, long intro paragraph. So I won that. I got to give the paragraph because mine was lower in the list. We'll work on the rules later.
You got to it first. 13 Sentinels grabbed me. I love Vanillaware as well. I tried to play through the Odin Sphere remaster recently and got further than I did on the original, but still not all the way to the end. I feel like 13 Sentinels was great. It really grabbed me. I really dig the story. The only it is like a game in probably the lightest sense of the term. You have
I knew this was going to be a criticism. Yeah,
you have dialogue selection. It's like a light adventure game, close to a visual novel, and then a completely separate tactical game that is not very hard,
but it's fun.
And is okay.
It's okay.
So, but the story, the characters, all the ways that those intertwine really grabbed me. I was immediately pulled in, and that's why it appears kind of higher on my list.
Okay, so someone in the chat just referred to the Nonary game series as the Notary game series, and I just really like that reference for a law channel. So I'm going to call it the Notary game series from now on. Thank you, Elizabeth Young.
It's a series of people validating signatures.
It is. Oh, man. God. Can you imagine? This is why nobody makes a game about a transactional lawyer. Due diligence. Yeah. No, I hear you. I understand the criticisms of 13 Sentinels, and I think they would be mine if the story weren't so darn strong.
Yeah, I think that as a game, we can get into this whole discussion, but like, how strong is it? And mine appears higher, so I don't even know exactly what I'm arguing here, except that like, I look at it and I'm like, God, I'm so glad that I'm participating in that story. But if I want to go play a game, 13 Sentinels is like I'm going to bed game, and I want to just like see a little cool story before I knock out.
It's very funny to give people the color here. It is the one game that I could tell you I do generally play while I'm eating a sandwich or something. You really just need your right hand and like a finger on the joystick and one on the X button, and you're going to be able to roll through the bulk of 13 Sentinels. So it's a little bit more like watching a vaguely interactive Netflix series, but it's a great one.
Yep, that's fair.
All right, now we're into the top 5. It has only taken us, an hour and a half?
81 minutes.
But look at the people that are sticking with us. First of all, I want to thank everybody who is with us right now. We're at over 100 concurrent viewers listening to us right now, Tom.
Yep.
And so I really want to thank everybody and everybody that's given likes and certainly everybody that's given money. We really appreciate it. We thought this would be a good idea to have this conversation. I approached Tom with the concept earlier this week, and to his credit, he held me to it. And so we're really having fun having this conversation, and now we're going to get into the really top-end games. You've seen the bottom of our list. You've heard our honorable mentions. Tom, are you ready for number 5?
Sure. It's always a surprise to me because I sent this to you, and now I don't have access to it.
That's right. Tom can't see it. He can't remember it, so he has to be ready on a dime to defend any game that might pop out there. He also has to trust that I actually wrote what he told me in these slots. There could be anything there, so let's check out what it is. Number 5 from Tom. Of course, he's getting a little of that scratch in, a little of the parent company cheddar. It's Crash Bandicoot 4. It's About Time, I think is the full title.
Yes. So, yes, Activision developed it. I didn't work on it at all.
That was a joke. Yes, he didn't work on Crash 4.
I didn't work on it at all. But this game it's such a return to form in terms of like games from the PlayStation era and like just sort of really like strong platforming execution. Not a bunch of extra stuff, just like really, really good platforming. Combined with ideas that you've seen kind of with platforms that you can make disappear and appear. I actually haven't gotten the other masks, so I don't know what other powers there are, but I heard they're pretty cool. It's
very hard.
It is hard. Oh, it is a freaking hard game. Probably, I would say, too hard. In terms of like, as soon as you get like the first power, they're testing you in ridiculous ways with it. Like, hey, can you flip that 10 times per second or whatever while you're doing this thing. It's like,
yeah, talk about
no.
the first mask. So there's a second button. There's a trigger button while you're in midair. You can flip things between states so that they're either in ghost form or that they actually exist there. And you think, oh, it's a normal mechanic. But now do it while 3 of them are moving, and you have to do it in midair multiple times in a row while hovering over a single box that you can only bounce on once while lasers are simultaneously coming after you. They're just like, you know what? This is the 4th crash. We're going to pretend like the 3rd one was yesterday, and you've mastered them all.
Yeah, and it's just, it's hard. And the funny thing is I think if you don't care about like getting everything, the difficulty drops dramatically. If you're just like, I just need to get to the end. But if you're if you're one of those people that really wants to hit every box and things like that, like there's a lot of challenge there. They put a lot of good sort of nostalgia, and I just think it's a really great, I don't know, addition to the franchise. Like I said, return to form. It just reminds me of these older games that you just don't see as much anymore, and so I'm really happy that this is here.
Yeah, I think the best part of Activision making an absolute fortune on the Crash and Spyro, I guess those are remasters. They're the same games, but they got a real big coat of paint upgrade. I think the best part of them making so much money on that is that they clearly see that there is at least a modicum of appetite for these games. And so I very much hope that Crash 4 is a success for them financially, because I agree with you. I played this game, and when the trailer first came out, I wasn't entirely certain about the art style, but it really, really works. There's a lot of stuff that can be earned playing the game, a lot of great costumes. You can play as Coco or Crash in all the levels, and it just has that kind of Looney Tune, really colorful, really energetic environment, kind of art approach that was so emblematic of the original series of Crash games. And yeah, when Activision first bought the IP and they made a couple of other, there was a first Crash 4, Crash 5, there might have been 3 that Activision made, and they just really weren't that popular. I didn't think that we'd ever see a day where you'd get something that was just such a spiritual successor to the originals, and it's really good, but I think we've undersold it. It is really hard, especially for 2020 gamers. Like, if you haven't been practicing these muscles for a long time, this is not Mario. This is crazy hard.
Yep. Nope. This is like Super Meat Boy almost, with the exception of
maybe not that hard. Yeah.
Like in those like just extreme platformers, you're finishing like a 30-second thing and expected to die over and over and over until you finish it. This is like a full 5-minute level where you're dying over and over and over trying to finish it.
Right. No, but it's very good. I respect its presence at number 5 on your list, so you're not going to get any back talk from me on that, even though it first appears from the guy that works at Activision. But we'll allow it. We'll allow it. Number 5 on my list.
It appears lower. That's the way that this works.
Number 5 on my list, that's where Immortals appears for me. Immortals Phoenix Rising. You heard me wax philosophic as to why I loved it so much. I think at the end of the day, one of my favorite things to do in video games is explore, to turn the next corner, see what the developers have put there, and Immortals is a very pretty place to go exploring, and you're rewarded for it in basically every respect. There's one thing that they do that Breath of the Wild doesn't do, and that is to have these very specific kind of puzzle-oriented locations. So you show up at a palace or something along those lines. They have these puzzles where there's these different orbs that are everywhere around this one specific central area. And basically every orb is its own puzzle, but also relates in general to one piece of the mythology that is represented by that place. And you sometimes get just kind of pictures or statues related to that, but often you get quotes and narrative dialogue about them as well. And it's just so fulfilling to go and do these nested puzzles to solve this area and to get something really good for it. It's going to grow your health. It's going to grow your stamina. It's going to be a cool new piece of loot. They have great cosmetics. Everything looks great. A lot of great fights. I really can't speak highly enough about Immortals. I know we already covered it, so we won't, just live here talking about Immortals for the rest of the list. But I really do recommend it. As my brother, while pitching various sales sites, has already said, it is available for cheaper than Ubisoft offered it all of 14 days ago. So if you're at all interested, check it out. But it really does get one of my highest recommendations. Just a fantastic game. From beginning to middle, which is where I am in it, because it only came out 2 weeks ago, people. Anything else to add on that, Tom?
No, like I said, just pleasantly surprised with this one. I wish it was Gods and Monsters in title, just because I think that was a much more evocative title.
Yeah,
Turns out
that's
that's
cool.
actually the name of one of the quests that you do early in the game, so I thought that was kind of funny.
It was a better title. There's no question.
But that notwithstanding, it's I'm really enjoying it. It's just like a fun, not overly serious, explore, but still like technically deep game. What do you really like?
It's great. Go check it out. I like the people in chat trying to guess what we have in the rest of our list, by the way. It's good. All right, Tom, here's your number 4. It's Crusader Kings 3. Talk to me about Crusader Kings. Why do you love a Crusader Kings? This was almost on my list, by the way.
It's funny. Like, I don't know if this is too niche for people.
No, Crusader Kings is huge. Everybody loves Crusader Kings.
So Crusader Kings is, it's a, what do they call them? Grand strategy game.
Yeah, that's Paradox's name for him, right?
Yeah. You pick, any European power, even, Asian and African powers as well. And you play as basically kind of like one person, one ruler, in that you're actually, I guess largely you're playing as the family, the house. Like if you lose your last family member, your game's technically over.
Yeah, you're like from a narrative perspective, you're like you are the highest title, and you kind of bounce between where the title goes.
Yeah, you're like the patron saint of the family or something like that.
Sure.
Like you're like the spiritual entity that just accompanies the family through time. But no, I really love it. It's really cool, like trying to figure out how to gain power in non-military ways, like using subterfuge and like setting stuff up so you have like the right people in the right place to claim titles.
But when you kill your third baby, doesn't it make you feel bad?
So I killed no babies.
All right, I've killed a few babies in Crusader Kings 3.
I did kill a nephew.
Okay.
But he really sucked, and he was like 9, so it's fine. No, it's Crusader Kings 3, and what really the best thing I can say about Crusader Kings 3 is it is like a story generator.
Oh yeah,
like if
emergent
you play
stories.
it, if you play it and pay attention to what's happening, where your characters will, have loss, get addictions, turn those around, or maybe not, get sick, have effects there. It's so, the stories that it tells are so real and feel so good, and they're purely systemic. They're like, this happened because this person's pious and this person's lustful, and but they play out in a very organic way that makes it just like it's probably in my top 10 or 5 for like a desert island game.
Okay. So this game does not assume an imminent apocalypse.
Well, if it does, it assumes that I have power still, and I'm not getting any new games.
Okay.
I just need something that I can play forever.
Right. And you're right. Game designers, developers, publishers in the future that just decide that they want to make Tom happy, if you give him a sandbox with systems that interlock with each other and you can have emergent stories pop out of it, you're going to get on his list. All right? Let's just be frank. My brother loves systems. I love them too. And you're absolutely right. The only unfortunate part is it's a little bit like talking to somebody about your fantasy football team. I went out to my wife and explained to her how I had set up my daughter to marry a lord who was already sickly, and I had to murder 6 people to make sure that the title went to her. All this great stuff, which is really awesome and fun. She wasn't as enthused about the long-form storytelling of Crusader Kings 3. But it is a great game. You have to kind of be willing to sit there. There's a lot of potentially watching things kind of come to fruition. But what separates it? What makes it better than Crusader Kings 2, Tomo?
I think it's more approachable. I think they did some things like Crusader Kings 2 literally was a game that you recommended to me, but you said you're going to have to watch this like hour-and-a-half tutorial on YouTube to understand what the hell is happening. And so I think Crusader Kings 3, as just general technical improvements, it actually is much more approachable in terms of how they try to kind of inform you about things going on. When you have, when something causes something to happen, they're more, I think, transparent about it in terms of like, oh, this happened because this and this. So you can kind of get an idea of at least why these are occurring and how you can potentially affect them. I think the man-at-arms system works better for the war. I think as opposed to just like pure levies, just like having some amount of standing military.
Yeah, it did seem easier to grapple with, just in general, in terms of, we play so many games, and I like so many things, and I like so many different experiences. It's very difficult to get into something that has that tutorial and that kind of gate between it and gameplay. And so I do think Crusader Kings 3 is more streamlined. It focuses more on characters. I like the character portraits. I like the tool tips.
Oh, yeah.
I like the
character portraits was a big improvement too. Like in terms of you can actually see kind of what a character's been through, how they how they are. You can really see their story in this character model that they're kind of aging throughout his life.
Yeah, I think it's
which
great.
is really cool.
I think it is great.
Oh, also, another thing. Crusader Kings 2 had at least one flaw that really bothered me, which was you could hire mercenaries, but their pay was based on basically how many of them were alive, and it was paid over time, minus some like signing bonus. So basically, my strategy was I'm going to hire mercenaries and immediately throw them at castles and whatever, because I can only afford them for so long. So I need to take this castle, so I'm just going to throw them. Whereas mercenaries in 3, they just changed a little bit. You pay for a contract, there's a period of time, and then you can re-up that contract later. But you're basically not incentivized to get them murdered.
Yeah, no, I know you like that change. There's nothing Tom hates more than something like that, like a little design flaw that makes the narrative fall apart. Really hates that. And makes it, he doesn't like it when you can min-max and be like, oh, okay, so I can do this thing that wouldn't happen in the sandbox because it makes sense from the game rules perspective. So, no, I get it. Crusader Kings 3 is great. Highly recommended. I believe it's on Game Pass right now. So if you have Game Pass, click the button. Otherwise, I think it's time for my number 4, which is Crash 4, which we don't have to dive into further, but Crash 4 is wonderful. If you at all have any nostalgic feelings towards Crash 1, Crash 2, Crash 3, which actually came out like in consecutive years back in the early PlayStation era, it is a fantastic addition to the franchise. It's got a lot of replayability. They've done a great job making it make sense to play levels over and over again. And I suspect you could probably get it on some kind of winter sale. I don't know what Activision is doing. Maybe Tom knows. Who knows? But highly recommended.
Yep.
All right. Yep.
Yeah.
That's one of Tom's famous contributions.
I had the long paragraph already. I don't need to respond to your slightly shorter paragraph.
No, you don't. All right. Who's ready for the top 3? I have to say, having read the chat while you were talking about Crusader Kings 3, you're going to disappoint some people, Tom.
I know at least I've seen one, but I think 2 of them are going to be good.
All right, hey, don't give away the game. We'll see how they're disappointed.
Was that really giving away? 2 of them you might like.
Who knows? I assume everybody's going to side with me when we come to the end of this. Yeah, if you aren't keeping track, one of the very last things we're going to do at the end of this video is you are going to leave a comment or otherwise comment in the chat or both, and you're going to tell us which one is better and why it's mine.
Well, so many people really hated that I had Last of Us. I think I'm just screwed.
Well, we'll see. A lot of people like Last of Us. They might just be quieter in the chat. Let's look at your number 3. It's 13 Sentinels. So this is up there for you. This is way up there.
Yep. It's just very rare that a game, especially. Okay, so I think part of why it is, and maybe I'm giving it too much credit for this, is these are this sort of visual novel, nonary games style game is not something that typically grabs me. It cannot take my attention because the game is so light.
Okay, so exception that proves the rule kind of thing.
13 Sentinels is no exception to that, but the story and characterization are stuff that I got really into. The sort of battle mechanics are fine; they're serviceable. So I can't. This one just really grabbed me and really took me really strongly for a while, and so that's why it's there.
All right. Well, 13 Sentinels we've already talked about at length. It is great, and so you should check it out if you're at all interested in what we've described. If you're not, it's not going to change your mind. But it is an excellent game. We don't have screenshots up right now, but if you saw how it actually looks, it's a very, very attractive game to actually just look at. And so I highly recommend it for that reason as well. All right, it's time for my top 3. I can only disappoint the people that subscribe to my channel, Tom. So we could just have people just fleeing the ships. You know what was the most downvoted video I think that I did last year? This might not be right, but I think it was close. It was me putting Pokemon Sword and Shield on my top 10 list. People really, really hated that. And all I can tell you is I had fun, but I also haven't played like every Pokemon between Red and Blue and now. So, is what it is. Let's see what number 3 for me is. It's Hades. I love Hades so much. Yep. Hades is such an excellent game. I'm not the biggest roguelike guy, and I'm a big Supergiant fan because they're always adding story into their games. I really love Bastion and is it Transistor? Did I get that right?
Yep.
And Pyre and Hades. They're really against multiple words in their titles. And I hope Pyre comes to some of the other consoles, mainly Switch, pretty soon. But Hades is a roguelike in which you are the son of Hades. You're trying to escape hell. You don't exactly know why. And literally every time you come back, because you go back to the beginning when you die, there is more and more and more story to tell and more context given to your actions. And that builds on itself and builds on the characters that you're talking to and builds on the Olympian gods that you're talking to and builds on the skills that you have and the weapons you receive. And each and everything that you do feels like it is building towards you getting better, you understanding what's happening more, all with great art, all with great sound, great voice, great music. It is a fantastic game, and it is very similar to what we were talking about with respect to Dead by Daylight. It is one of those games where I have to be cautious about if I turn Hades on, it's difficult to knock yourself out of that loop because it's so much like, I got a little bit more skill. I can do this now. I think I can get a little further, or I got a new weapon, or I got a new whatever. And it's just so easy to just be like, you know what? I thought I was going to play something else, but Hades is good, and it's already on, and the controller's in my hand.
Yeah, no, Hades is a very strong pick. It's a great roguelike that actually. So one of my favorite things that a roguelike can do is make it so that multiple runs are narratively make sense.
That the conceit makes sense. Yeah,
and I love that. I love that when it's like, okay, so the fact that I got out or whatever doesn't act like there's still more story after that, and I think that's great. And Hades does that tremendously. The action is tight. There's a lot of build diversity in terms of the weapons and the different boons you can get. It's fantastic. Like it's one of my favorites this year.
Yeah, it is. It is an absolutely wonderful game, and I recommend it to everybody. I wonder if I click on this button. Oh yeah, look, that worked. If we look at Tom's number 2, he of course loves Hades as much as I do, if not a little bit more. And I don't know what else you can say about it. It was one of those that was in strong consideration for me at the top of my list because it is such a great game. It is the rare game that I actually played in a little bit in early access, and it didn't completely add to my distaste for games. For whatever reason, I'm just wired to not love to see how the sausage gets made, which I know is what you do every day, Tom. But I like to see the finished products. The finished things, they're really polished, they're done like a Cyberpunk. I just like to see them out there and finished completely before I really partake in them. But Hades just came together so well, and I continue to be really, really impressed by Supergiant, effectively trying to make seemingly every type of game and just adding a ton of story to it and seeing if it works. And it most certainly works with Hades, and as I've already said, I have a tilt towards Greek mythology, and it has some interesting spins on it.
Yeah, Hades, like I said, one of my favorite games of the year. I just like it's so easy to pour time into it and have different experiences and fun experiences. I couldn't be more happy with it. The interesting thing there is like I had Hades, I think when it went on early access, so it's been out. I think it came out last year on early access on Epic, and so even then, like I played it a little bit then, but then what I typically do with early access is like, yep, that's going to be a good game. I'm going to wait until they're done with it.
You check in on it, say, yep, that's going to do it.
Because I've done the ones where it's like I play it throughout early access, and then it's like, oh, I missed some events at the beginning because they fixed them, but after you're already past them. Anyway, no, Hades is phenomenal. Supergiant continues to impress. Basically with every release they've done. And also with just like interesting kind of systems that they do. Transistor had the time stop and the spending the programming points. Bastion had the idea that the world was kind of being built as you went through it. Just really great stuff.
Hey, Pyre seems to be the one everybody forgets, but I really like Pyre.
I straight up forget Pyre. Isn't that like it's like football with like a cauldron or something?
That is a very reductive way of describing Pyre, but yes, it is like football with a cauldron. So yeah, absolutely. No, Hades is great. Supergiant is great. Could have easily won, I think, on both of our lists, in all honesty. But my number 2 is only internally divisive towards me, because this was by far the easiest game of the year for me to name, about 95% through its running time.
Oh, okay.
Final Fantasy VII is a special game for me. In 1996, really, I remember getting my pre-order from then Electronics Boutique for Final Fantasy VII, which was a game that I had seen advertised in whatever magazine that I was reading at the time, and I was so enthused about it. I think it might be certainly the game I pre-ordered that I remember the most, but might have even been my first pre-order ever. I got a slip from the Electronics Boutique. It went in my wallet, and when I was feeling bad in high school, in those tumultuous times, I would take it out and be like, you know what? September 7th, 1997, that game is going to come out. It's going to be great. It was in my wallet when my uncles threw me into a pool, and I had to take it out and blow dry it because I just wanted to make sure that the Electronics Boutique could still read it. And it was almost as good as the hype that I was building up towards it. I love Final Fantasy VII to death. Final Fantasy 6/3, still my favorite Final Fantasy ever. But 7 is tremendous, holds a very, very special place in my heart. And Square Enix had basically been fooling around with people's expectations about Final Fantasy VII for years and years and years. When the PlayStation 3 was launched, they showed how they could do the entire Midgar pullout in real time. They continued to kind of hint that Final Fantasy VII might be remade. They had the worst trolling ever. I think it was at the PlayStation Experience, where they said, it's finally the time you've all been waiting for, and released like a high-res version of the 1997 game. That's where you get the famous meme of the Square Enix executive laughing. And then by the time they actually released or announced Final Fantasy VII Remake, I was all in. And this game, when the demo came out, and it was the same Midgar bomb, the reactor run that was the demo that I had played throughout 1997, I was so excited. And it lived up to every bit of its promise throughout its running time, except for one small fact, and that was that the game developers, we're not going to go too deeply into spoilers, but they didn't want to actually just remake Final Fantasy VII. They wanted to have Final Fantasy VII Remake, the project, be a reflection of Final Fantasy VII's space in the video game ecosystem, and wound up finishing it, much like you might be familiar with animes like Evangelion or things like that, as this kind of meta-contextual reflection of what it meant to be Final Fantasy VII. And while a lot of people like that, it works for a lot of people, and it might even work for me in a different context, it means that the Final Fantasy VII Remake project, which I love as a game, which I love so many scenes from, which I love the combat, and I love the visuals, and I love the music, and I love most of the voice acting. We can talk about Aerith some other time. With that all being said, it means that what I got and what I potentially will get from Square is not the project that I thought I was getting or that I thought they had promised. And so you can go and you can check out my postmortem on this game. I think it's an hour long, where I reflect on this a little bit more with more spoilers. But it is 95% exactly how I wanted it to be, and 5% exactly what I didn't want it to be for modern Square Enix. And as a result, it easily would have been my number 1, but instead is my number 2. Tom, how far have you gotten in Remake?
Nowhere. And so you won't see it appear on my list, and that is not because I think it's bad. I did play the demo, and I thought it was phenomenal. I was excited to play it. You basically, I think, just binged it in like 4 days or whatever.
It came out on like a Friday, and I'd beaten it by like a Tuesday.
And then the first reaction you had was like sadness.
Well, so I was tweeting out. You can actually go follow me in whenever this was, March, and you could see me saying, I can't imagine that this isn't going to win Game of the Year, because I'm just like rolling with it. And then I hard stop, full period.
Right. So I honestly blame you for the fact that I didn't play it or get anywhere in it, because you had kind of set me. You ever hear like, oh, this is a really good show, except the ending sucks, and then like you're like,
Do I want to invest in it at all?
Do I want to watch that show?
I mean it that there are a lot of people that like it. It does open up things for them, and that's not what I wanted out of the project. You might like it more. The problem is that I know you don't like Kingdom Hearts and some of the other modern Square Enix things. You're not that into Final Fantasy 15 or what have you, and so it really does start to be like, okay, you had this structure, you had this framework, this skeleton of a game that was, if not perfect, at least fundamentally sound. And you said, that's nice. That's fundamentally sound. We don't like being sound. We're going to do something else crazy. And if you trust us, it's great. And if you're like me and you don't, you say, oh, no.
Yeah, so it's on my list to still play. I think that's something I want to do. I'm curious if it will get an upgrade. Just because, why not?
Well, since they're going to try to sell a sequel, it might, just kind of as part of that marketing push.
Yeah, or at the very least, just uncap the frame rate or whatever. Just let me do. Actually, that might be in there now. I don't know. Stuff that came out towards the end, like this year, towards the end of the generation, were kind of basically set up to uncap as you move forward, so that you could basically do this.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to play it more, and it sounds like I ruined it for you, so I'm sorry about that.
No, it's you definitely soured it for me to the point that I was like, I don't know if I want to invest the time in that if I have a similar reaction. Because you were like crestfallen. It was like someone had punched your dog or something.
All right, well, he's overselling this a little bit. People are going to
It is not. I believe it was like, I'm trying to remember. Someone said, family members said he's very depressed.
Oh, no. Okay, so first of all, our parents are just a little bit...
It's worse than when his football team loses.
Oh, my God.
It was worse than when they killed off his favorite character in Downton Abbey.
Okay, all right. Okay. All right. You know what? We'll have a whole different live stream about Downton Abbey sometime. I'm sure people will flock to it. But before then... I do think that it was one of those things that I had waited for so long, and really you do have those announcements from Square, and we do have a text here from Brandon Vic Boss Morgan that says if Ghost is number one, all is forgiven for these lists. We'll have to see.
What affront were our lists until now?
Hey, they're still in affront. The people are pointing out that Avengers is on there, and they're already unsubscribing and declaring me an enemy of the people. Final Fantasy VII, as I said, I got to give that disclaimer for my personal tilt, because it is one of those pieces of media, and it might be a game for you, it might be a book or a movie or a TV show that just meant something to me at a particular point in time, and then it kind of became this thing, and I was lucky enough to just have it be something that they wanted to remake at all. And then for it to be like achingly close to exactly what I wanted, and then to veer off and not do that is almost more painful than it not existing at all. So it's a tough game. Obviously, I put it at number 2. I have gone back to it because the soundtrack is amazing, and so much of it is amazing that it clearly was the game I liked second best this year. I just really wish it was my first best.
Yeah, after talking about it, I kind of want to go play it now. I remember playing the demo, and I remember the demo of Final Fantasy VII, and like how similar those were, and like how cool it felt when they took those effectively 2D environments, turned them into 3D. It still felt appropriate. The fighting felt similar to that, but like much more it just felt great. And so I think that I really do want to go try it and make my own estimations.
All right. Well, you heard it here. You got to hold him to it. So the next THABTO, he has to have beaten Final Fantasy VII Remake. And he could have a year. We don't know when the next THABTO will be. So hold him to it, chat. Hold him to it, everybody. Is everybody ready for Tom's number 1? Yep. Tom, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
There's only one person
what response you were expecting. Like the chat's going to explode?
There's only one person that can respond to me in audio, Tom. So... All right, are you ready for number 1? I think this is going to be very divisive. You're going to have to defend this to your core. Are you ready?
I don't think so. I think it's going to be okay.
All right, explain why Ghost of Tsushima should be at all anybody's number 1, Tom.
Ghost of Tsushima was phenomenal. Phenomenal storytelling, phenomenal gameplay, phenomenal music, arts. This game floored me. This is easily number 1 with a bullet. The funniest thing is, so one of the things I say to people is that the way you feel about something is often the difference between what you expected it to be and what it actually was. Ghost of Tsushima, honestly, weeks before it came out, Rick and I were watching videos together, and I was like, it doesn't look that great.
Yeah, there was a PlayStation Direct, right, where they talk about following the bird and things, and we were actually watching it on Watch together, which we didn't stream. Sorry, everybody. We were watching it together, and we were both like, eh.
Yeah, it's like, I like Sucker Punch okay. The Infamous were pretty good.
Oh, give me Sly.
Ghost of Tsushima was absolutely phenomenal. I loved every part of it. I still have to go platinum it, which I want to do mostly as a sign of respect. I really did. When I platinum a game, it's just like, you deserve this.
That's how I felt about Days Gone.
And so there's no question. If you haven't played it, definitely play it. It's just phenomenal. It's a great story. It's a great world, and it's great combat.
It is phenomenal combat, right? Like, you always feel, and I feel this way about Cyberpunk and some other open world games, and you always feel like you're kind of giving up something to do something else well. So, like, Cyberpunk has an awesome Night City, but, guns and quick hacking, and it's like, I don't quite know. Or you can do that with, Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption, which is like, it's never really fun to shoot people in those games. The world is really the star. Or other games that you can think of, I'm sure, and put on that list. Ghost of Tsushima, you wind up with an awesome world that self-directs to different things, that gives you that exploration that you find in places like Immortals, that builds the character up while telling you a story both about the cities and the world that you're in. And also, if you happen to stumble across some people, you get into ridiculously awesome samurai fights. And so when you combine those, a great combat system and a great open world, to me, it winds up feeling, and I think Ghost might be better than it, I really have to think about it, but it winds up feeling like Spider-Man, that just great combination of two different skill sets, of the open world and the story beats and everything else, and the combat. And it's rare that you get those both in one game. And so I totally understand why Ghost of Tsushima is your top game. This is one of those that you have beaten, that I have beaten. It's yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I just wanted to reiterate one of the things that you said, which is it's so focused on delivering, like, this is, we joked about calling it Samurai Simulator 2020.
Yeah.
Or at least I joked, maybe you didn't joke. But, like, the idea that it gives you that fantasy, like, just amazing.
You're just
like,
a samurai.
If you're a fan of Kurosawa or any samurai, popular culture.
Sure, Star Wars. There's a lot of Star Wars in Ghost.
It delivers it in spades.
Yeah, you got the duels, you got the darkness and light. I mean, one of the things that really goes unsaid a lot about Ghost of Tsushima is it's like this meditation on whether the ends justify the means, and revenge and betrayal, and killing and not killing, and honor and not honor. And it's not like it's super difficult. It's not like it's all just up its own behind, but it does have things to say about things that are separate from slicing people in half with a sword. And that was unexpected for me. I was already happy slicing people in half with a sword. But by the time you roll through the whole story, you're like, wow, that was actually an effective Netflix series or movie or novel or book or whatever. And that was the big surprise. And before I get waxing too effusively about it, I think we should probably show that we actually have matching number ones on our list here. We both have
I was hoping yours was something completely random.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to talk about this.
You just thought it would be my legal practice management software would just be number one?
It's like 2 Point Hospital, number 1.
2 Point Hospital was like number 7, but it came out last year.
No, did it?
Or maybe 2018. I definitely have a video on it. Check it out on my channel. But Ghost of Tsushima, you could see on our lists, both number 1. I think at the end of the day, we probably both found that a pretty easy slotting to give it. It was by far the most well put together, polished, meaningful experience. It's even better on PlayStation 5. They've cleaned up some of the stuff, given more frames. Brandon Vic Boss Morgan is very happy.
Yes!
He's given us another $5 with a yes. We're very happy to please you, but we also note that if we hadn't put it there, you would have been upset. So we understand where you're coming from, Mr. Morgan. But yeah, Ghost of Tsushima is a game that I think Sony struggled with a little bit to actually tell people why it was better than an Assassin's Creed or anything else. Like when we were watching those videos, I looked at it and said, well, that's Assassin's Creed feudal Japan, which is great because we've wanted an Assassin's Creed there forever. But like, why would that be different? And Assassin's Creed does a lot of good stuff, and it does a lot of environmental storytelling well, and it does a lot of things that I like. You can see Valhalla on my list. But the actual narrative drive of the main character, the golden path, the main story is often not as compelling as you would hope for it to be. I can only tell you in Valhalla, it's like, take over England, like give or take. Like I'm sure it will have a capper and it'll make a little bit more sense. But for the most part, it's here's 80 hours, go take over England. And Ghost of Tsushima is always focused on not just the macro of the Mongols invading Tsushima, but the micro of what it means for you as an individual and the characters around you, and what deaths and betrayals and rivalries and mentorships mean to your character, even while you're slicing and dicing and learning fun ways to poison people and make them crazy. That it stands a head and shoulders above most open world games that I've gotten to experience, and certainly for my money, more than the Rockstar games of the world that keep you on this linear path. It takes the big depth of an Assassin's Creed or a Metal Gear Solid 5 or what have you that lets you have all these options to do these various things, and then puts that with a narrative that is far stronger than I had expected from Sucker Punch, to be frank. My apologies, anybody from Sucker Punch that winds up watching this. Hey, I think you did a great job on this one. I just didn't know you had it in you, so way to prove me wrong. I think it's a fantastic, fantastic game. And unfortunately, I think the way the art works, the screenshots don't actually do it that much justice. I think just seeing the game in action doesn't do it that much justice. Not playing those sword swings, it doesn't do it that much justice. But if you can actually get in there, it's fantastic. And that's without even talking about them just randomly adding a multiplayer component that's as big as the one in Avengers.
Right. Yeah. They just like drop. Oh, by the way, there's this huge co-op loot grabbing, like looter slasher.
Yeah. No. Here's an awesome loot grabbing build multiplayer survivor mode thing that we were also building at the same time, which we also put a narrative element into that has 4 different classes and builds, and we're giving it to you for free. And It's just a fantastic product. And just a fantastic experience that I'm so glad I got to have, especially, and this is going to sound bad, but especially with the taste of The Last of Us Part 2 in my mouth when that game came out, where I was just like, I might be over AAA gaming because that was not what I wanted. Ghost of Tsushima comes out and says, yeah, no, you're still a gamer. And I thank them very, very much for that.
Yep. No question. Worth your time, worth your money. And, I hope Sucker Punch made a bank on this and will continue to develop stuff like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the list at the end of the day. Tom's list is Ghost at number 1, Hades, 13 Sentinels, Crusader Kings, Crash, Demon Souls, Immortals, something called Wolcen, Cyberpunk, and The Last of Us Part 2. Great list. I think a lot of good games on there. Certainly when we get towards the top, we start agreeing a little bit more. And then mine is Ghost, Final Fantasy VII, Hades, Crash 4, Immortals, 13 Sentinels, Miles Morales, Astro's Playroom, which will not brook the offenses that Tom has leveled against it this day, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and Avengers. I also want to point out, somebody put in a note here that said Half-Life Alyx is the game of the year for me. The Jeff level and the final level were some of the coolest moments in gaming for me in a long time. Wish more people could play it. Just watching it on Twitch doesn't do it justice. I want to give a special shout out to Half-Life Alyx. It couldn't make our honorable mentions list because we haven't played it. But I've heard nothing but fantastic things from everybody. I very much would love to give it a chance in the future. I very much appreciate. I'm going to go with Caver as the name of the person that gave that comment to us. If I had played it, I have no doubt that it would at bare minimum be on honorable mention, but I just didn't get a chance. So, with those being our lists, vote now. Who's right? Who's wrong? And why?
How are we?
Is it me? Oh, what? You could ask the chat to tell you who's right and who's wrong. Look, Ian says Tom's list, and he accidentally put the less than sign the wrong direction. And then Rick list. It's okay. The alligator eats the bigger thing. So you just flip it around. You just flip it around. It's really no problem. No, I want to thank everybody, by the way. We've still got more than 100 viewers here. We've gone over 2 hours. A lot of people watched us for a good long time. A lot of likes, a lot of very generous people. Thank you so much for helping keep this channel going and helping me explain to my wife why I do this ever. So I really thank everybody for stopping in, for watching the ads on Virtual Legality, for putting chat money into these kinds of things, and for really making me bug my brother to be a part of this channel again. I think we both had a good time. I don't think anybody's too terribly offended except Astrobot. Is that pretty accurate, Tom?
No, I'm not offended by Astrobot. I just think it's like, it's not a game.
Okay.
It's like a demo that came with the PlayStation.
Well, I've got people disqualifying me for just including Avengers. So, you know, it's absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine. I want to thank everybody once again, and we are going to try to do THABTOs more often. It's just a matter of figuring out what time works, and 2020 has just been a bear on that score. So thanks for keeping with us. Thanks for checking out Virtual Legality. Please tell your friends. We're having these conversations about video games definitely very often with a business and law component, a little bit more fulsome than the one when we have two Hoegs are better than one. But if you like these conversations, if you like what you heard, tell folks that we are here, ring bells, hit subscribe. I very, very much appreciate it, and thank you once again. Goodbye, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.